Today, scientists are using gene editing to develop cures for diseases that have caused humans unimaginable suffering and powerlessness through the ages. But at what cost? Because in the wrong hands, gene editing will be a weapon that causes unimaginable suffering for millions, if not billions, of people. Does the potential for good outweigh the potential for bad? It's a heavy topic, and today we're going to tackle it. Hello, thinkers. I am futurist Air Sansir, and I am obsessed with the future of science, technology, and pop culture. Evolution. Everybody knows what it is, but not everyone knows what I'm about to tell you. We are in the middle of an evolutionary eruption. Let me just put this into perspective. 4.3 billion years ago, we think that's when life started on Earth. Much later, about 10,000 years ago, we were cultivating crops. 250 years ago, the Industrial Revolution. 17 years ago, just a microscopic amount of time later, we mapped the human genome. And last year, my parents paid a couple $100 to spit into a tube and mail it off and learn all about their genetic makeup. And today, scientists are designing human babies. You thought that was always just around the corner, kind of like meatless burgers. And now with a type of gene editing called CRISPR, we are this close to having the power to create life and take it away. And this is the scary part, to create it in whatever image we'd like. Now, first off, gene editing isn't new. Things like corn, pepper, rubber, and even your pets, your dog and your cat, they all exist because of the tampering of our ancestors. But artificial selection is absolutely dwarfed by the power of CRISPR. So in this video, we're going to answer 4 questions. First, what is CRISPR and what can we currently do with it? Second, the bad. What catastrophes can gene editing bring about? How can society prevent them? And what can you do as an individual to keep yourself and your loved ones safe? Third, the good. What are the benefits of gene editing? And what does a pleasant gene editing powered future with less suffering look like? And fourth, once we've covered our bases and we have a well-rounded perspective, we'll tackle the tough question, is gene editing good or is it bad? So the first question is, what is CRISPR and what can we currently do with it? CRISPR stands for clustered, regularly interspaced, short palindromic repeats. And now that we know what it is, let's talk about what we can do with it. All right, just kidding. Essentially, CRISPR is a way to edit DNA. So as we all know, DNA are the building blocks of life, and CRISPR is a tool that can cut out certain sections of DNA and put something else in. With CRISPR, we can theoretically cure cancer and sickle-cell and cystic fibrosis and HIV and malaria. Today, scientists are working on cures for every single one of those diseases. Think about what I just said. Like in the next 10 to 20 years, we might have cures for diseases that have ravaged millions of humans for thousands of years. So 2 years ago, a Chinese scientist and his team threw ethics out the window. They modified the embryos of twin human girls to make them resistant to HIV because their father had HIV. And those girls are alive today. But around the same time in the US, technology for screening human embryos for hundreds of genetic disorders became available to the public. There's something called IVF, or in vitro fertilization. I'm sure you've heard of it. But what you might not know is that as of 2019, about 1 million babies every year are born via IVF. Now, during the IVF process, not all the embryos survive. And this is key because in order for IVF to work, the doctor has to use multiple embryos. And if one of the embryos survives and the others don't, then that's fine. But what happens when multiple embryos survive? Well, the doctor and the parents have to make a choice, which to kill. And combine this with the fact that today we can screen for genetic disorders. And also today scientists are able to find correlations between the genetic makeup of an embryo and that person's future height and their GPA and their IQ score. Doctors and parents can now use criteria to decide which babies to kill. And this is the beginning of designer babies, because now we're using artificial selection, just like we did for millennia, on crops and farm animals. We're using it now on humans. So that's the current state of gene editing technology. But now for the bad. What catastrophes might gene editing bring about, and how can the government prevent them? And what can you do as an individual to keep yourself and your loved ones safe? So the first point I want to make is that Any new technology will probably be used by bad people to cause suffering. We're going to do a thought exercise using some very rough numbers. So the current population of the Earth is about 7.5 billion people. And some of those people are geniuses, let's say about 1/4%, which comes to about 19 million people. Now, it's been estimated that about 1% of people are sociopaths. And these are people who don't have empathy or remorse for harming others. And that means that there are 180,000 geniuses roaming the world with potentially bad intentions. Now let's go a level deeper. How many of them have access to gene editing technology? Not very many, obviously. It's a very new technology. But as we saw with personal computers, the economies of scale will kick in. It's safe to assume that within about 15 years, much of the middle class will have access to gene editing technology of some sort. Now, if that seems crazy, just know that today there are already thriving biohacking communities that are building homegrown ways to hack their own bodies and share their methods publicly. And 15 years is a long time for those techniques to mature. In other words, in 15 years, there might be thousands of people who don't feel empathy, who are geniuses, and who can create viruses at home. And here's the important part. We don't need thousands of viruses to cause a pandemic that spreads like wildfire and injures or kills millions of people. We just need one. Whether it's a lone wolf terrorist like the gunmen that plague America today, or a group of nationalist or religious terrorists, all it takes is one virus to bring this catastrophic vision to fruition. Now, my millennial and older viewers will remember the early days of personal computers when hackers created viruses which took out hundreds of thousands of computers before antivirus software caught up. I think we'll see the same with genetically engineered viruses, except it won't be computers getting infected, it'll be us. Now, is this future certain? Of course not. But it is possible enough that you should be preparing for it. So biological terrorism, that's one catastrophe that gene editing could cause. But what about accidents? We've all seen the zombie movies, you know? Will zombies actually be real? Do I think we'll get infected and get superhuman strength and the ability to thrash around when half our torso is gone? No, our bodies are still going to be human. But what if someone engineers a virus which strips away all of our higher level thinking so that all that's left is our primal urge to eat and to commit violence? So we've got two possible catastrophes, biological terrorism and accidents. But here's a third one, what I call class chasm. Now, we have all heard the term class divide, and class chasm is like that, but on steroids. With class divide, people in poverty are kept in poverty by people who have money to impact public policy so that they get to keep their money and their power. And this is a problem today already, but gene editing is going to make it a lot worse. Here's a quote from Mark Thyssen of the Washington Post who explains it beautifully. Scientists will eventually be able to alter DNA, not just to protect against disease, but also to create genetically enhanced human beings. The same techniques that can eliminate muscular dystrophy might also be used to enhance muscles to improve strength or speed. Techniques used to eliminate dementia may also be harnessed to enhance memory and cognition. This would have profound societal implications. But isn't this good? I mean, why is this catastrophic? Well, here's why. Because the wealthy will have the earliest access to the best human-enhancing technologies. And not only that, they'll keep getting smarter, and then they'll design even better human-enhancing technology, and they're going to use it on themselves. We'll have different types of humans, and the abyss separating the poor and the comparatively stupid from the wealthy and extraordinarily smart, that's going to be as wide as the Grand Canyon, and that's why I call it the class chasm. We see this scenario a lot in science fiction, and it's never a good thing. So we've covered 3 possible catastrophes that gene editing might bring about, but what can be done to prevent them? Well, first of all, the government would have to regulate it. Researchers will need to provide documentation showing that they've thought about all the ways that their technology that they're developing could benefit and hurt humanity. And the second step is that those considerations would be made public so that humanity itself could decide how it feels about a particular technology. So that's what the government can do. But what can you as an individual do to keep yourself and your loved ones safe? I've got 4 things for you. First of all, you need to be more active in politics, and you need to elect officials who advocate progress tempered with caution, officials who show empathy for everyone, regardless of race, income level, sexual orientation. These are the kinds of people who will keep us on the right track. Number 2, you can stay away from highly populated areas. Now, a terrorist with a biological weapon, they're not going to hit the Idaho countryside. They're going to hit highly populated areas and world travel hubs. Now, obviously, this is not feasible for many of us who, in fact, live in these cities, but it's still an option. Number 3, don't be the first to try gene editing technologies. Even when it goes mainstream and it becomes normal for people to modify their own bodies, just let the new gene editing technologies, let them sit in the market for a few years and see what the statistics say about how healthy they actually are. And lastly, number 4, the most important thing you can do to keep yourself safe is to keep up with the news. It applies today, it's going to apply decades from now. And when catastrophe hits, other people will be caught off guard, but not you. So now we know what CRISPR is. We looked at the dark side. Now let's just take a deep breath and let's imagine, what does a pleasant gene editing powered future with less suffering actually look like? Gene editing will help with physiological needs for everyone, so we're not starving or thirsty or cold. And it'll help with safety and stability needs like good health. And it'll even help with societal needs like enhancing your relationship with your friends and family. Now, some of you watching may recognize those needs. Those are the 3 base layers of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which in my opinion is the best model we have for understanding what makes humans live meaningful lives. So I'm going to look at how gene editing might impact those levels of Maslow's hierarchy. First, the physiological need of food. I think we'll see a boom in genetically modified foods that have been proven statistically to not be harmful to humans. And we'll see gains in production efficiency, which means food supply could eventually catch up to population growth, and we could see global starvation gradually disappear. Second, safety and stability. A future free of diseases like sickle-cell cancer, blood disorders, blindness, Huntington's, muscular dystrophy, HIV, and malaria. And it's not just about diseases, but quality of life later in life. The elderly will be able to live out their older years peacefully without the natural burdens of tremors and declining eyesight and hearing and decreased mobility and balance and decreased mental capacity. And the rest of us will be healthier overall and more physically capable of doing the things that matter to us, like playing sports or hiking or skiing without blowing out your knees and lifting heavy objects without worrying about your back. Third, social needs. And yes, gene editing will greatly impact your social life. Here's an example. Think of an older person in your life that you love, like your parents or your grandparents. Why don't you spend more time with this person that you love? It's because you're younger. You're on a different physiological wavelength than they are. And they've slowed down. They go to bed earlier. They don't have energy. Their knees can't handle hiking. They don't play sports because of lack of coordination and balance and fear of injury because they're on pain meds and blood thinners and beta blockers. And mentally, they've slowed down too. Now imagine, say, 15 years from now, that your loved one starts genetic treatment that just kind of takes the edge off of aging, and they keep up their anti-aging treatment over the years as the technology keeps getting better and better, and by the time they're in their late 80s, they might feel like they're 40 again. Can you imagine how that might impact the next 3 decades that you get to spend with them? I mean, the activities that you'll do together and all the lively conversation. Gene editing will make our relationships more engaged and fulfilling and add value to our lives. I think it'll happen. All right, so now I think we're ready to tackle the 4th question. We looked at what CRISPR is. We looked at the potential catastrophes and the potential benefits. Now, with our minds saturated with the future of gene editing, I think we're ready to tackle that question. Is gene editing morally good or bad? So first of all, what is morality? Anything that helps humanity survive as a whole is morally correct, whereas anything that helps the individual survive at the cost of local or greater society is generally immoral. And that's actually what 7 of the 10 commandments say. So will gene editing help humanity, or will it help the individual at the cost of humanity. Well, remember we talked about the early days of personal computers when viruses hit hundreds of thousands of computers. And at that time, it would have been so easy to say that computers will always be infected and under attack. And yet, look where we are today. We have antivirus and anti-malware and anti-adware. And in general, our phones and our computers operate just fine. And we're even comfortable sending our credit card numbers online. Now, are things perfectly secure? No, and they never will be. But are things safer than they are unsafe? Or are things better than they are worse? I think so, and I think the future will one day look the same for gene editing. And when you think about it, all technology is just the modern day version of the two sticks that we rub together to make fire. And is fire morally wrong or morally right? No, it's neither. It's just a tool that can be used to cook food or to set fire to your enemy's house. And gene editing is just a tool too. For humanity as a whole, self-preservation is a fundamentally stronger urge than self-annihilation. And I think that overall technologies of the future will mold themselves to humanity's need for self-preservation, so that even though lots of bad people will use gene editing for bad purposes, overall I think gene editing will do more good than bad. That's what I believe. I'm Ersan Seer. Thanks for joining me on this journey. So CRISPR stands for clustered regularly interspaced short palin blah 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 blah. Fucking stupid. Who came up with this? CRISPR